In Ethiopia, the way they would greet is you'd shake hands and then they'd pull you into a hug, and then if they really, really liked you and if you knew them really well, they'd hook their head behind you. And so there's a couple of people who just, I got to know really well and I loved, and every time they'd greet me, they'd say, "Oh, quero fire da busho," and they'd grab me and pull me in, and they wrap their head around me and they start nuzzling the back of my head with the back of their head. It was quite interesting. That took a lot of getting used to as well. And by the end, I'd just see them and I'd beat them to it. I'd go, "Oh, quero fire da busho," and nuzzle the back of their head with the back of my head. It was great. One of the phrases that they'd use all the time is "da busho," which is "I'll die for you." That's what it literally translates to. But it's just like really, really respectful, and they loved it when they say that. If you get somebody who's like "Quero fire da busho," and they'd be and they'd like start laughing and they'd throw their hands in the air. They'd be so excited, like "Oh, Ferengi," which is foreigners like Ferengi. Then they'd be so happy that we said something like that. Super respectful. One experience that I had, and this is not a common experience, that probably would happen 1 in a million times. We were the wrong place at the wrong time, but there was a festival for one of the tribes, and they were celebrating their strength and their greatness as a tribe, and we were on a donkey chariot riding from one area to the other, and our driver was from the wrong tribe, and he was disrespecting their procession. They had a couple hundred people, maybe 400 or 500 people walking through the road in their tribal gear. It was more traditional. It wasn't like actual war gear, but they had their spears and they had their hats and stuff like that. And he just kept on driving the donkeys into the back of the procession, and they kept on telling him to stop. And so finally they kind of got fed up, and they pulled him off the chariot and started beating him, and then they started trying to tip our chariot. They pushed us down a hill, and we jumped out of the chariot before we crashed, and then they surrounded us and just kind of, I don't think they meant harm. Maybe they were kind of in a frenzy, but they were smiling at us as they were surrounding us and jumping up and down with their spears. It felt kind of scary, but the fact that they were smiling, either they were smiling because they were happy they were surrounding us, or they were trying to scare us and show us, I don't know. But luckily someone happened to be driving by, which was surprising because that was a really unfrequent road, and a lot of people have cars there. Not a lot of people do. So this guy drove by and saw us surrounded, and he kind of drove into the procession a little bit to get people away from us, and then he opened the doors and let us get inside, and then he shut us in the doors, unlocked the doors. Yeah, it was a great experience. It probably will never happen again. It's not common. I never heard of anyone else having that happen. We just had a bad chariot driver who was not respectful of people and what they want. A couple times we had to leave just because there was tribes attacking the other. So we'd see people going by in trucks with 15 or 20 people in the truck bed with guns, and we'd say, okay, time to go. Because we lived in one area, and then we took a 30-minute bus ride to our area. So if we heard anything like that, we'd just jump on the next bus out of there. The locals would know that there was trouble, and they'd want us to get out of there because they didn't want us to be in the wrong place. And usually, so even if their bus was full, they'd stop and let us on. Or people would say, hey, you need to get out of here. Things aren't good. Come back tomorrow. It'll be fine. It's just some stubborn people. But people were good at watching out for us. The weather in Ethiopia, there wasn't a single day that I went home dry. I was in a very rainforesty area, very lush and green. Not a lot of what people think of Africa when they think of Africa, but rain on and off all day, and then we'd go back home soaking wet and change clothes and do it again the next day. In Uganda, they had the best pineapple I've ever tasted. I don't like pineapple here anymore. I'm spoiled. Last week, I had the first pineapple that I've said, I actually enjoyed this pineapple. They have the little miniature bananas that are like this size. They're really good. And then some other bigger bananas. They have really, really good mango in Uganda as well. Oh. People will shake your hands and they'll hold your hand while they're talking to you the whole time. In Ethiopia, their staple is something called injera. And so what it is they get teff, which is kind of like rice. They'll make it out of teff or rice. And they'll make it into like a paste, and they'll let it ferment, and then they'll pour it and fry it on a grill, and then it turns into this giant like a sponge, and so you tear with it, or you don't use a knife or fork or anything like that. You just use your hands, you tear it, and you pick up meat with it. And they put all different types of sauces on it. So there'll be like lentils or beans or just a spicy sauce or a chicken sauce or a beef sauce, or depending on what you want. And you can order it in like a million different varieties. They have like a mixed dish, which is like macaroni noodles, and then cabbage, and then tomatoes, and then meat, and then beans. And so everyone would share a giant platter. And the platter's about like that big, and you just tear it off and grab it and then throw it in your mouth. Tradition there is if they wanted to respect you, they'd feed you, so they'd tear it off for you and then put it in your mouth and feed it to you, and that was like a form of respect. Favorite dish is called tibsfurfur, and they'd soak the sponge in this meat sauce and then have chunks of meat in it, and then they'd tear up more of the sponge and throw it on top, and so a giant mound, and so it just really, really good. Sounds disgusting, I'm sure. Fermented rice made into a sponge with nasty sauce, but it's really good once you get used to it. The area I served was in a village in southern Ethiopia, and they had milk that's really old, maybe 20-30 days old. It's just clumpy and rotten, and whatever comes after milk, it was almost to that stage. And I had that once, and then I got a bacterial infection, so I didn't drink that. So if you go to Ethiopia, don't drink the milk unless you know it's clean. And they had a cultural drink called kanito, which is just really, really bitter. They say it's just, you either hate it or you love it. It was just this purple drink. I don't know what they make it out of. Most of the restaurants that you go to, they have these steamers, and so you can get fresh milk there, and then they'll steam it and make it warm, and then they'll add sugar. That was one of my favorite things to get, is just really hot, near boiling, kind of like sweet milk. We don't have a lot like sliced bread, so if we wanted to buy bread, it was more like rolls. That was almost like a baguette, you could say. And so when we were eating food there for breakfast, we'd fry up eggs and then mix them with potatoes and then get these baguettes and just tear it up and eat it together. They didn't have mangoes that I saw very often, or they had bananas, but more common was guavas, at least in the area I was serving. So you could buy 50 guavas for $1. One birr for 4 guavas, and it's 17 birr to the dollar, so I'd buy for, a 1/17 of a dollar, I'd buy 4 guavas, and then I'd buy a couple bananas, and it was great. I loved it. And they had some really good strawberries there. They don't write in English characters, they have symbols instead. And so everything is phonetic. So they have 33 symbols, basic symbols, and each one of those symbols represents a consonant sound. And then they have a few symbols, maybe 5, that represent what they call explosive letters. So you have like ka and then ka, or ta and ta, or cha and cha. They have 29 basic symbols, and those 4 or 5 explosive symbols that are used for different words. Off each symbol they have 7 variations, and those represent the vowel sounds. So you'll have a symbol for be, bu, bi, ba, be, bi, bo, and then ke, ku, ki, ka, ke, ki, ko, and then de, du, di, da, de, did, do. So every symbol has 7 variations, and those represent the different vowel sounds, and that covers almost every single sound that you can possibly make. They don't have something for the, like th. So if you wanted to write English words with their symbols, you can't write the. There's a couple of other sounds that they don't have, but for the most part, there's about 200 and something symbols. I'm not sure what the math adds up to. 33 times 7, yeah, 231 symbols, something like that. When you're greeting people, you refer to them as father if they're an older man, or mother. To greet an old man, you say tanastalin abat, which abat is father, and then tanastalin is just like a very respectful form of saying how are you. And she's like, oh, tanastalin abat, and you shake their hands really slowly and show them a lot of respect.